Mr. Triganath, the G7 leaders are currently meeting at the German Alpine Castle of Salzalmau, and the summit is taking place in the backdrop of the Ukraine crisis that has triggered a major food crisis as well as issues relating to energy security. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in South Germany to participate in the G7 summit. Ahead of the G7 summit, our Foreign Secretary said that India's regular participation at the G7 summit clearly reflects that the Western countries, they need India's support to confront major global challenges. So how do you see the G7 summit that is taking place in the backdrop of the geopolitical turmoil triggered by the Ukraine crisis and India's participation at the summit?
The G7 is a very important grouping, even if informal, and it has been in existence since 1975, as you know, and its priorities have changed over time. In the beginning, it was for economic, then it became security and foreign policy, and now it has started talking of climate change, energy security, food security, and all those issues that were not there initially. So today, the world has gone through this pandemic, and there immediately after that, we have the Russia-Ukraine war, which are having tremendous impact. One can see on this advanced and the modern world is suffering a great deal from the Russian war because of their dependency. So therefore, when we are talking that this backdrop is of the Russia-Ukraine war, obviously it is energy security, energy crisis, food security, food crisis. They are very important dimensions. In addition, all these 7 countries have been supporting Ukraine against Russia all through. So for them, it is an immense priority. But for Germany, which is the host, for it did not want to completely this issue to hog the limelight or take away. So it wanted some kind of global agenda, which was like progress towards an equitable world, so to say. Now, in this situation, we have seen how the Western world behaved when the pandemic happened or when they are behaving now, even this time. They are looking at their own interests mainly. So in that situation, I think that there is a very major problem. Of course, Germany is still trying very hard that the main agenda items like the sustainable planet or economic stability, healthy lives, investment in a better future, and stronger together. So we have heard several announcements. If you remember last time, there was a discussion that there will be a build back better world, and then nothing much has happened. But then President Biden has again announced that the countries will generate about $600 billion in order to fund various projects, which is basically a counter to the BRI. China obviously always remains in the room, irrespective of whatever the real problems at this stage are. So we are seeing that these are major issues, maybe sidelined to some extent because of this war, but at the same time, the sanctions that they are placing or the gold purchase from Russia is being curtailed. So they'll continue to have those kind of measures to contain Russia's movement into Ukraine. But at the same time, they are also trying to save themselves. Now, as far as India is concerned, we have been associated in the outreach meetings for a very long time. But actually, in the last 3 consecutively, Prime Minister Modi has participated in France, UK, and now in Germany. That shows clearly that India is an important global player that cannot be dispensed with. When you are making global decisions or making global planning or some kind of solutions for the global problem. So India is very much on the forefront. India is very much needed because it has 1/6 of the population. It is the largest democracy and the second largest market in the world and the third largest economy. In addition, India's moral authority in the international relations is very, very important. Therefore, Prime Minister Modi's presence there, and he will be addressing at least 2 of these major symposiums or conference in that particular session. So there is a lot on the agenda and a lot on the plate. But I don't know during this time that the G7 will really focus a great deal on other issues other than simply how to contend further against the Russian invasion.
Mr. Triganath, you very rightly pointed out that India has emerged major global power, and for solution of any global issue, actually India's support is required. And that's why Prime Minister Modi's participation at the G7 is very, very significant. But from India's point of view, what is the significance of G7 for India's international goals, India's vision for the Indo-Pacific? And how do you see India's benefits from joining the G7 grouping deliberations in the G7 grouping? Though India is not a member of G7, India has been, invited to it for last 3 consecutive years.
You see, number one is that the G7 represents nearly 45% of the global GDP. Now, India is looking for investments, wanting to have good relations, working on various free trade agreements with these countries. And India's USP is its democracy and the large market and the fastest growing economy. So it is definitely on the platform where the economy is being discussed, where the climate change is being discussed, because India is the first country which, along with France, has started International Solar Alliance. As you know, one of the initiatives in the renewables, India has done amazingly well itself. So there are all these issues that are putting India in an important position. Now, when you become a regional or a global power, then you tend to take greater responsibilities. More importantly, I feel that India's stance, even in Russia-Ukraine crisis, is not palatable to the Western countries who would have liked India to be with them or on the same platform. But India has taken a very principled stand. And this principled stand for peace, for cessation of hostilities, for dialogue and diplomacy, in my view, have given India a greater moral authority today to talk to the world and try to put a bit of a sanity in the place where the geopolitics is being played to the hilt. So that is what I say, that India's strategic autonomy at this stance, even if disliked, as was earlier the case during the NAM time, will continue to provide the dividends to India. You know, we are discussing the free trade agreement with European Union that might be signed by the end of 2023. We are discussing with Canada. He met with the Canadian Prime Minister. With Indonesia is the G20 presidency now. And next year, India will be the G20 president. So in a way, if you come to think of it, the G7 to G20 continuum is what is extremely important. And the next year, India will be carrying the mantle of it. So from that perspective, I see that India is extremely important. That is a great benefit to exchange views with various countries on various issues that are of global concern.
Mr. Sreekanth, Prime Minister in his departure statement had said that he will be discussing issues like environment, energy, climate, food security, health, counterterrorism, gender equality and democracy with G7 leaders as well as the leaders of the partner countries which were invited to the summit and G7 partner organizations. So how do you see Prime Minister's reference to cooperation in the counterterrorism?
Well, as you know that Prime Minister has mentioned all those 4 or 5 points that you said. They are basically the themes of the two conferences where he will be talking and addressing those issues at the G7 forum. And of course, we're meeting all these big leaders coming from all the countries, that the partner countries or the international organizations. But at the same time, what is important from India's perspective is terrorism is something that has been a very major problem for India for the last 4 decades plus. And therefore, the countries like Pakistan or others using cross-border terrorism as an instrument of their foreign policy. Now, as you know that under international pressure, whether it is from the G7 countries, all of them are on the same page as far as terrorism is concerned. But Prime Minister Modi had actually raised a very fundamental issue in 2015 at the UN Security Council. He said, unfortunately, the terrorism has not even been defined properly by the international community. So that's what precisely India says, that you need to be very clear about how to fight the terrorism, because see, terrorism is a global problem like the climate change, and we have to continue to cooperate so that we can counter it. And that is a constant dialogue. And then, of course, the agencies keep on exchanging information with one another on various. So there is a greater exchange of information which happens with the big countries and other partners who are strategic partners, so that there is going to be a joint fight against terrorism. So it's absolutely important and imperative to keep on talking about an issue that is global in nature and more particularly problematic for us.
And Mr. Sreekanth, thank you so very much for your detailed perspective about India's engagement with G7 as well as the geopolitical turmoil that has been created by the crisis in Ukraine. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.